high crisis.
Yeah.
So that may be. All right.
Good to see you.
So, do we have the? Are we technically ready to start over there?
Oh yeah, we're taking.
Okay. I'm adjourning the meeting of Friday, February 28th of our Sandag Audit Committee, and the first item is the approval of minutes. If you've had it, any of you have a chance to read it, and I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes or any corrections. Motion by Bob. Second by Stuart. Okay, now we vote. We hit one to say yes. Passes 4-0, and for the record, Mr.
No, it's three and abstain.
Oh,
I wasn't here last month, so I was unable.
3 and abstain, and for the record, Mayor Wells will not be joining us today while he is on his vacation.
Bill, just to be clear for the record, I wasn't here last month, which
Okay.
is why I could not vote. I
yeah.
have no knowledge.
That's fine. Do we have any public comments or communications? I didn't see any parents. Okay. We have an executive director's report, although he will forego it to keep us on our tight schedule, but he'll be commenting on some of our items later, hopefully. And then we have your sort of generic update on number 4. Do you want to say things that aren't embedded in 5 and 6?
Yeah, that's what I'll bypass that. The only thing I'll really say is today we got the budget moved up. The board approved that, so we got the budget moved up for the vacant position. So I have a candidate that I had already interviewed, and I'll be making that offer to her. So that's good news. The risk assessment is going well. I'm still on target to have the report and the matrix produced by April or May.
I wasn't here last meeting. Did you introduce that distinguished gentleman to your right at the last meeting?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I will again. This
Okay.
is one of my new co-workers, and I'm happy to have him here, is Lloyd Carter. And he comes to us from DOJ, and he's been here, this is his second month.
All right.
He's very friendly guy.
Is he super friendly? Good. You like it so far, Lloyd?
Yes.
Good.
Not to learn.
There you go. Okay, so now let's cut to the action, which is number 5. Our Office of Independent Performance Audit request for additional audit resources, proposed FY 2021 budget and revised audit plan.
I provided, thank you all, I provided a detailed organizational analysis that supports the additional 4 staff that I'm seeking, 1 support staff, and also a contract for a data penetration team that I plan to bring to the board if the committee recommends that, and to the executive committee. I'll go over at the retreat this analysis in a summarized format as to why I'm seeking additional staff in some of the areas of risk that have been identified thus far. The positions that I'm requesting would bring us to a sufficient number of staff, but still leave us under the average of those agencies that were compared, including City of San Diego, County of San Diego, San Jose, Sacramento, and SCAD, and Port of San Diego as well. So if there's any specific questions around the analysis that was performed or around the positions and why I'm seeking them, I'm happy to answer that.
Right. Paul, Stuart, and Bob.
One question. Sorry, just some clarification. Noticed in me now.
Bob, can you speak just a little
Yeah.
louder?
I'll try to speak a little louder.
Thank you, sir.
Your recommendation that you were asking for, one part of that was a contract for outside services pertaining to the IT penetration testing.
Yes.
I think I understood the analysis. This was a one-time thing, if you will.
Yes.
The question I have, would it make sense to make this more of a part of the budget from year to year in case you do have circumstances come up?
I definitely, I'm always happy to make anything more a part of a budget that I can count on from year to year, and definitely would utilize it. I think the criminal database and the toll operations and the data around that is a very crucial area. There's a lot of risk associated with it. my understanding, to my knowledge, there has not been a data penetration team. I think what I hope to get out of this one contract is not only that they come in and kind of penetrate into the system to see if there's areas of weaknesses where we can then build controls around, but also help train and develop one of those staff that I'm asking for that would be able to do a continuous auditing around that as well, which I think would support it rather than having to have a contract for it every year. So my hope is to have this penetration team and then also at the same time have one of the auditors learning that to where they can on a continuous basis audit around it.
I'm looking at the staff. I don't know everybody's jobs. Do we have anybody either from the ARGIS side or from the data management side here? Go ahead.
We got somebody from the ARGIS side.
Okay, go ahead.
ARGIS has been under me for a few months now.
Okay.
Let's see what I can answer.
Okay, the question would be, when we did our risk analysis, we thought some of the most sensitive data is about criminal information and the toll, the license plate and the information of the tolls. And although that might not be in the top of all of our SANDAG mind when we're thinking about transportation, the risk of that being breached is high. So what she's proposing is a test to see how strong the system is. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. In fact, one of the roles of our former IT, our chief of IT, is we've moved him into a position under Laura as the data security. What's Bill Mount's title now?
He's the information security officer.
Information security officer.
Brand new.
To do just this thing, and two of the highest priorities, we just met with him yesterday on ARGIS, having to do with, everything there is to know about security for that ARGIS network. Folks that access that ARGIS network have to have background checks, and that's a much higher level of security. The same with when we collect a toll. There's PCI compliance, and it depends on how many credit cards you get that raises the level. And so the same person that would be in charge of that, in fact, that person's boss, James Dreisbeck Toll, was in charge of like our Compass card program at one time. So he's very familiar with that. So we think we're doing pretty good as far as new avenues to delve in to make sure we're well protected.
So the question, I'll let Mary speak for herself, but to shorthand it, the question is because the risk of that information getting so bad, should we self-evaluate it, test it ourselves to see if it can be breached? If we can breach it, other people can breach it. Mary, you should speak
And
to
I
this.
really think that
Is that a
it's
fair
not-
rendering of what your
Yeah,
point
but
is?
it's not so much tech, and that's why I want an outside person to come in who specializes in data penetration to test it, not for us to self-test it, which is my whole thing is I really want an independent penetration team to come in and kind of hold us to our, okay, what are we doing, and are we in fact doing it, and does it work? And then in addition to that, train an IT auditor who can then completely check up on to make sure that they are having the systems in control, that the contractor who handles the toll is PC compliant and is doing their security audits as well, and do that whole realm of data related to continue to ensure that a breach does not happen. I mean, I think the Port of San Diego experienced it, and it's nothing that we want to have happen.
Do you have a comment on that?
Look, she's the independent auditor. She knows what she needs, and I would have no comment on that. So without comment, I want the committee to know that, and I think Jim would agree. I think ARGIS, there's the data part, but it's really a law enforcement function that has its own GPA, has its own processes, has its own hiring procedures, background checks, etc. So, you could separate the data part from the law enforcement part. It would be hard, but you have to keep in mind that. But I'm not, I have.
No, and I have been in law enforcement, so I get that whole part too, of the background and the requirements around that. But I think with that, a contractor would have that exposure and that experience from the perspective of law enforcement and data around law enforcement and the data itself.
So we're not saying you're doing anything wrong. We're saying what you're handling is so sensitive, maybe we ought to.
I can speak for
challenge it to see if it holds up.
And I had the chance to speak to the chair yesterday afternoon, speak on behalf of my team. It's not for us to determine what she needs to do her job, but like the chair and I spoke, it becomes at the end of the day a budget issue on how you pay for it and where the money comes from and what the priorities are. But you will never see me question whatever she said she needs to succeed. I would say that I think I want to make sure that every area in this agency is protected from all aspects. At the same time, we also need to be within our resources to do these things. And Mary and I had a conversation about this. So whatever her needs is that she's qualified to judge that. How we pay for it, I think something the board probably would be interested in hearing, like you and I from yesterday. And the bottom line is I want to make sure the agency provides Mary and her with the right teams. Is the question how you pay for it and when you bring it and etc.
When I talked to you yesterday, forgive me, I forgot to bring up this concept of the data penetration team. I don't know in the rules of finance, is that something you charge to an overhead of the system, or does it have to be an independently funded? Each activity has its own funding stream. I don't know the answer on that.
Well, all I can
on that one discrete task.
All I can tell you right now, all the expenses for Mary's operation is from this assessment dues. That's why we doubled the dues last year for the city. Yes, you could make an argument, you could pay from an overhead. I don't want to go into that risk area. I want to make sure that whatever she decides. So I think whatever she decides her program needs is going to be from the dues assessment. If we have enough dues to pay for it, great. If not, we'll go to the board.
You don't think you could independently charge a test of the toll data or the other aspect of it against the toll?
You could make an argument, but this will not be the main source to fund that.
Okay, well, let's come back to that in a second. Do you want to go through the other pieces of it?
Well, unless there's questions over the request that I'm making, I mean, basically, I'm asking for the audit committee to make the recommendation to the board for approval of the positions and to seek the funding. I mean, I know that there's two pieces to that, right? I want to bring to the board the support as to why I need audit staff and my justification and my analysis, and then really options of funding. And it's going to be up to the board ultimately to say we can get the funding or we can't. And in that, the board decides whether they want to accept the risk of not having a sufficient amount of staff or not. And that's not my decision. My job is really to show you what staff is needed at minimum to be able to sufficiently audit and lower risk around.
And my job is to support her, get what she needed, because I welcome any areas where we audit and we make sure we're doing things. And now if you have nothing to hide, you don't worry about it. But I also welcome a discussion from the board and to be realistic. Maybe this is important enough for them to double the dues again.
Okay, well
that's
then,
the case. I know your blood pressure is rising.
No, my job is to be realistic with the board, and let me tell you, they're not raising dues for an auditor. I'm not even voting to raise Lisa's dues for an auditor. So we have to start thinking how else we're going to do that. That's not
And the chairman
realistic.
and I discussed one other option, and that is a legitimate option, and I recommended against it last year, and that is to sue the state.
Yes.
Or file the claim first.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, just
And
file the claim.
Here is a.
805 says it's a funded mandate.
Hold on. You want to go? Let's let Mary go first
All
on
right,
the
go ahead.
mandate.
So that is option. So along with my analysis, I didn't just want to drop to the board, here's what I need, go get it for me, right? I brought options to the table as well. And one of the options is yes, I have a breakdown of what it would cost if it was to be absorbed with fees. Understanding that there's only $100,000 for 1 year, then that would be reduced the next year because I'm only looking for that contract for 1 year. It would be to increase the fees, which I get. That's probably not an option that most want to hear. The other is to file a test claim for a mandate because it is AB 805 is a mandate. And I know that if we at least file the test claim, it needs to be done by April 1st of this year, or we lose the ability to ever file a claim. And filing a test claim only says that we filed the test claim, and yes, there is sufficient evidence and support that there is a mandate in increased cost as a result of the mandate. And then we would have to file every year a mandate reimbursement, which is also reimbursable, by the way, that process. And so that's another option. And then other options is for the board to direct funds, overhead, as part of overhead through federal, state, and other funds, direct that money be paid in that way. That's sort of the options, but not my ruling to
You know, I
make.
understand, and let me just, for the committee members' information, I shared this with you yesterday. In my previous past, as executive director, I twice tried to sue the state for making us do a regional housing need assessment, which is a state mandate but unfunded, for a big region of 191 cities and 19 million people. And twice I've been told, take a hike. You know, you collect money from the cities, you get money from the state, you're able to pay for it. I am totally with Mary. I mean, when I talked to our chief counsel, I said, what's the likelihood of us succeeding? He said, less than 50%. So I made the recommendation last time when we took it to the board, don't bother. Don't pay fees for a lawyer. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, and if the board decides to do it, I think it's an area where we should go. But that's really the only way. You sue the state, get money, raise the membership dues. And in the overhead, I'm nervous about, because simply sometimes when the feds give you money, they're very specific about how to use that money. So yeah, I mean, you could make an argument. I would rather give her the resources she needs from either raising the dues or be successful in the state suing and getting money back.
And I audited state mandates for about 10 years with state controllers. So I'm not, I mean, I guess from a city perspective, you would say it's suing the state, but it's actually filing a claim to be reimbursed for fees that you're entitled, for increased costs as a result of the mandate that you're entitled to have. And sometimes they will say it's unfunded, and they will allocate or appropriate $1. And they may do that for 5 years. However, the mandate doesn't say because you only are appropriated $1, you only get $1. In 5 years, they could appropriate the funds, and I don't know why they wouldn't, because California's not in the red, which is why they usually only allocate $1 to some mandates. But that is all, you get reimbursed for all of that back years anyways. It doesn't, you don't lose that if there's not an allocation for 1 year. It's due to you. So I have audited cities, counties, school districts that didn't get reimbursement on 10 different mandates. And then in 5 years, they got it all. So they got all that funding on the audited.
Okay, then, hold on for a second. Amberlynn, do you want to at some point weigh in?
I would just note that in December of 2018, the board of directors did consider in closed session an item that was related to the decision of whether to file a claim for the unfunded mandate. And at that time,
Of this particular thing or all?
For this particular,
Without
80805 matters.
Without revealing closed session
Yes,
information.
and I'm a
Did
little
we?
bit limited in what I can
Right,
say.
but do we file requests for mandates for other things in Sandag?
We have not.
We have not.
That's-
We have not. But the board in December
So,
28 specifically
You-
considered.
You're saying, just, this is important, Sandag hasn't successfully filed a claim for state mandate on any program since you worked here?
No, we have not.
Okay.
But my question then,
Okay,
have
just-
you
I
ever
wanted
had,
just
have you ever
understand.
had a mandate other than this one in Sandag?
Well, I don't
Housing
think
need
it's
assessment.
that.
is
Okay.
I mean,
All right,
That's
so
my question.
you, understanding the risk, Mary's correct, it can be done. Amberlynn is saying, we've never done it, and Hassan's
board-
saying, we tried it a couple of times.
The board took an action, by the way.
It didn't.
in December.
And yet, if I could just
Board
complete
took
that,
an
that
action.
in December of 2018, after considering the item in closed session, the board directed staff not to file the claim.
Yeah.
So that is the current direction that we have from our
You
board.
can change it, so if you want to go back to the board.
Let me let you guys
What's
weigh in on it.
I mean, when I think of filing a claim, it's filling out a form.
Yeah.
2 hours. What's wrong with that? I mean, is that right, or is there more to it?
Well, I think when the board met in closed session, they considered the likelihood of success of the claim and the costs associated with that, which I believe informed their decision at that time.
And
That's not
let
to
me
say
go
we
back
can't
to
go
my-
back to the board yet.
So go back to my question. Are we talking, how long does it take to file a claim?
It wouldn't, the claim is actually a 2-page claim. It's a form. You really just have to identify the legislative, the AB 805 behind it, and then the costs associated, which means you attach the budget, the cost for the positions that I'm asking for, and any other costs associated with the independent performance auditor, or AB 805 is also. And then you send that in, they look at it, they look at the claim, and they say, yes, you have a claim. And by the way, the cost associated with filing a claim is also reimbursable.
Is there, well, is there a filing fee or something? I mean, here's what I'm thinking. I look at like
It's a
balance.
low-cost option.
Yeah, that's what I've got a balance
There
beam
is
that
no
says.
filing fees to file.
So we've got an hour, with staff time of 1 or 2 hours to file a paper, and a possibility of picking up hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we don't think that's, I mean, what's the?
I don't know how much time we have to assign to Amberlynn's office. As a lawyer, I don't want to assume it's cheap, but, you know.
I do, and because it was discussed in closed session, I'm not really permitted to give very many details, but the decision that was made at that time was weighing all of the factors that went into whether or not to file a claim. The board opted at that time not to do it.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just to say, are you at liberty to say whether it was a cost-based decision or a political-based decision? Because to the point of my colleague here, it just strikes me that it's got to be a relatively modest cost option on getting a whole lot of money back. And so if you had to spend, I don't know, $10,000, is $10,000 too expensive to pay for the prospect, you know, even a de minimis prospect of getting back, you know, what, and we're not talking about just a year one recovery, right? We're talking about a
Every year.
perpetual recovery, which is going to be millions of dollars.
Well, I recommend that we take it back to the board in 2 weeks. You guys be there, and let us see why the board decided what they decided. Maybe they
Is this
can-
we do at the retreat or what?
At the
after
retreat, if you want to meet the April 1st deadline.
But
Okay, so for the, correct me if I'm wrong, Amberlynn, we're an advisory committee to the board, so we can recommend to the board
Right.
to file that. We can
Yeah.
attend the board meeting, persuade that, but ultimately it's their decision. Yeah,
Correct.
so go ahead.
The question I had, Amberlynn, closed session, that was just focusing in on Mary's position, right?
No, it was related to the
805.
cost associated with the implementation of AB 805, which includes the establishment of the Office of the Independent Performance Auditor, the Audit Committee, and the related activities.
Without really knowing what the staffing level would even be for that particular
Correct.
office. Correct.
This came about when we started discussing raising the dues.
And that's where I kind of go back to, now we have an analysis that the board can actually look at. So listen, for Mary and that office to accomplish the objectives that she's required to do under AB 805, which is the analysis that we have, this is the outcome. So again, I just throw that out there. There's a little bit more meat for the board to chew on.
I'll be happy to place on the board agenda a recommendation from you to reconsider their decision in December of 2018 not to file a claim, and make a recommendation from you for them to reconsider and file.
Can you take the motion today on that?
Yeah, but yes, but there's a couple of other pieces of this that I'd like to get all on the table, and then do a collective motion. Go ahead,
I
Stuart.
actually have a question sort of in a different direction. Maybe it was in there and I just missed it, I apologize if it was, but could you just confirm the 600+ thousand that you're talking about? Is that a kind of like a real cost for next year, taking into consideration the fact that all 5 people are not going to show up day one, the consultants are not going to start doing their work day one? Or is that if you were to take all of those people and then assume that they worked for the entire 12 months, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it's the latter.
It is, so exactly that, because I like to show the whole picture, because I'm not going to exist for 6 months or 7, I need to worry about this long term, right?
Right.
So for the cost that I'm asking for, it's 640, I think 46,000 approximately, that will need to come from somewhere. And 100,000 of that is for that contract. So it will be long term, about 600,000 that needs to be made up on an annual basis somewhere. And those are hard numbers.
Right, but for the next budget year, there won't be an actual expenditure because of the start, so, okay.
There will be, but probably not nearly that much.
Well, that's my
Because
point.
we are looking at probably 3-4 months of that year, that we have to do the hiring and all that process. So, yeah, I would say 4 months of that cost probably wouldn't incur.
So part one is that for the next budget year, the real hard dollar number won't be 600 something.
It's
It
probably
could be-
75% of it.
Oh, okay, well then, that leads to my second question, because the 75% forecast suggests a degree of confidence that I admire. Have you, but don't take this as any kind of commentary on your prior management experience, but have you had an actual occasion in the past where you've kind of done this magnitude of a startup, wherein at the particular year you brought in 5 people, sort of going from, no disrespect, virtually 0?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually did that at the Energy Commission. I was brought in as the only individual, and I actually had to develop, and I don't know if you know much about the state, but the state has got far more stricter processes. So you have to hire people, get them on a list, score them, interview them, and then start all that. I had to develop duty statements. So a lot of that's already done here. So yes, I have done that, and I have done it in a 6-month period.
Okay, 'cause, well, I would defer to your judgment and experience here. My only comment is, I tend to be a little bit of a walk before you run kind of person, and I know that in other experiences that may or may not be directly relevant, sometimes when you try to grow too fast, the implementation itself kind of creates some problems that could be avoided if you so for example, if you said, okay, look, next year let's add 2 people, everything's going smoothly, the year after that we'll look at adding another 3 people.
And I
But
understand.
that's your judgment.
So we're looking at it from an audit perspective. So definitely, I think the analysis shows that Sandag has not had a sufficient amount of staff for 40 years, to be blanket on auditors. They've got 1.5 auditors for a $1.3 billion annual, which is really insufficient. But I've been here for 10 months, and in my 10 months I've been here, I've went through hundreds of pages of risk assessments. I've gained understanding, I've learned the environment, I've identified the areas of audit risk, both from a control factor and an inherent risk factor. And so I don't believe in any way that I'm running before walking. I think that the staff that I'm asking for is still insufficient, but would get me where I need to be and get me off the ground to start auditing around some of these areas of risk, to bring some mitigation and some comfort level to both the public and to the board members around Sunday.
Okay, to speed it up so we get out 1:45, I have kind of an idea, but we have to put all the variables on the table. The next variable, perhaps the last one before we get into the full discussion, is, and I guess I'll take your opinion, and your opinion. Isn't it possible to assign to individual projects a fraction of the overhead that would pay for audit duties? Okay, so it's not the state reimbursement answer, it's not the dues answer, it is.
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to talk about that? You can talk about that, you can talk about it. Go ahead, Mayor.
So again, I come from, as a chief auditor at county, that's what we did. We were part of the overhead, which is funded through federal, state, and other grants. That's what the overhead is. I'm sure, and I'm not, most council offices are all part of overhead. HR is part of overhead. So usually, audits is part of overhead. So that is an option, and yes, it is reimbursable under most federal grants, unless you're specifically auditing to one grant, then it's a direct cost.
Amber Lynn, do you want to?
I generally agree. I would say that each grant is specific in what type of expense is reimbursable to that grant. So without reference to actual grants, I can't say with any certainty or give a particular amount, but in some grants it is available and in some it is not.
As a direct cost.
Son?
I mean, the CFO is here.
Okay, or Andre, whoever wants to comment on it.
So I would say this. Yes, of course you could use overhead in some instances, but if we want to move ahead and hire permanent staff, I would rather have more secure either dues or getting back filing claim against the state. That I would feel more comfortable with that, because sometimes you make an argument for an overhead, and it happened to us, and they come and audit you and they say you have to pay it back, and I don't want to go there. I would not want to put the agency there. I think the two, honestly, I don't dispute anything Mary said about her needs. I respect that. Let us say whatever her decision is, 3, 4 stuff, whatever that is, what it is, and let us say we file against the state. If we don't get that, you pay it from the dues. And if you pay it from the dues, what's our capacity to pay now, and what increases there is? That's what I'm more comfortable with.
Couldn't we do a 3-step? We file, if we don't get it, we make a serious look at the appropriate, not all of them, places in overhead, and then the last backfill is
We
to
could.
do.
You ask me, I'm telling you, I would
Yeah.
be more comfortable in having coming from either the state or the dues, as rather than gamble and take a risk. And you know, I say that in sincerity. The other thing I would say also, I think back to Mr. Albern's point, and you and I touch on this, is does the independent office need all these staffing right now, or can they stagger them so I could help figuring out the budget? Yeah, look, I'm cutting 10% of the payroll by next fiscal year, because we want to be clear that this is, we want to be efficient. So I don't know how the board's going to react. You could make a recommendation to the board, but I would still strongly suggest, even though it's allowed, like Amber said, it's allowed in certain projects for overhead not to go there, but to go for the dues and filing a claim against the state and see how that goes. And so, like you said, 2 processing. We file a claim. If that doesn't work, we'll come to the dues and we'll go from there.
Okay,
and
so
I will do my best to accommodate Mary's with a reasonable thing that I can do within the budget.
Okay.
So,
See, this is why it's kind of a Rubik's Cube. You have 3 variables, and you have 3 people who are sort of vetoing each of the variables. And I'll speak for the council probably inappropriately and say it's no guarantee you'll get the reimbursement. I will speak for Hassan and say charging it to individual projects is a risky proposition he's not comfortable with. And I'm saying, as a board member who has to go back to my city, who thinks they're already grossly overpaying for Sandag, saying, hey, can you give us all more money so we can audit Sandag? I'm not going to be able to sell it.
you just got $12 million for your, what do you mean, you're paying like 50,000?
Well, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Maybe I can get out of La Mesa, but not every city. The point is, and the other reason it's bad is, correct me somewhere in here, you just assessed dues.
Yes, we did.
So now you can't like,
No, I
hey,
understand, I get it.
you can't like,
I get it.
they just paid their taxes, you can't say, send them a supplemental bill.
I get it.
It wouldn't be till the next cycle anyway.
Dornberg does that to me all the time.
So, those are the variables. And the weird thing about this discussion is nobody is disputing the need. We're just debating how to roll it out in a way that financially it can happen. Just as context, when is the next time there's a discussion about dues being
Next
raised?
retreat.
No,
No,
but,
the dues, there is,
March
we
13th.
doubled them much.
no, but do you do them on an annual cycle or?
No,
every 2
no,
years?
no. We did, well, actually, we have not raised the dues for 14 years, right, or 13 years. Yeah, and the only time we raised them was last year when I started.
So on March 13th, is there going to be discussion about raising dues?
No,
Well,
not unless that
Yeah,
thing.
so, and I.
No, independent of that.
No. No.
The dues raising independent of the audit is already done.
Budget goes to
Okay.
to the executive.
Do you
For the next 10 years at least.
really?
Yeah, I'm serious.
So
I mean,
what you're
doubling-
saying, if you want to do it for dues, you have to jam it in on the March 13th discussion?
No, you don't have to jam it in. We could do it in April, but yeah, you have to do it in this budget cycle.
But Bill, with that being said, I already spoke to the vice chair, and it's already on the retreat executive committee's agenda, where I talk about the need for these positions and how to fund it, which includes increasing fees. So I think, if I can, I would like to get the support of the audit committee for the positions, and for me to share the options of reimbursement, a way to pay for it at the executive committee, and leave it up to the board to say, is there a way Hassan could support some of those positions moving forward, and then get them as we can get them? I think it's important that the board be aware that we're insufficiently staffed and that we need positions. And maybe I don't get all of them right away, but that doesn't mean that I can't bring them and show them and make them understand the need for that.
I don't think anyone's disputing that you're going to bring that forward and say we have the need. But, you know, you don't, it's good planning. You don't bring something to a decision unless you've mapped out the plan. And right now, we don't have a viable plan because we don't have consensus on the reimbursement from the state. We don't have consensus on the overhead, and we don't have consensus on the dues. So I'm trying to see if we can forge that before you go to the board. Because you're saying, I'll just take it to the board and take my chances. You might come up with 0 then.
No, what I'm saying is Hassan has shared that he would find a way within his capacity to help fund 2 of those positions at a later
Okay,
time.
well,
Is that
speak for yourself
possible,
there.
Hassan?
So I spoke to the chair and I spoke to Mary about this. If we go from 4 to 2 positions and we start the second half of next fiscal year, which is January, which she has to wait a long time, about another 9 months, then I'm gonna do my hardest to figure out a way how, without taking any risk, to fund these 2 positions. Other than that, I would strongly suggest, at a great political risk for me, is to go to the city and says, is this important enough for you? And if it is, double the dues again. If it's, and I agree with you, Bill, for 10 years as a CEO, I managed not to raise dues simply because even though the amount is little, the political damage out of that is huge for the agency. So I'm not there saying, well, let's just go raise this. I don't want to touch it for the next decade. That's why we went for doubling last time. But in this case, if the discussion goes and the board feels this is important enough to raise the dues, let's raise the dues and let's be honest about it. Let's discuss it. I doubt that, I am with you. I doubt that the board will be there. And if Mary needs resources, I want to make sure her office gets resources, but I can figure out how to pay for 4. Second half of next year, we'll figure out how to get 2. I'll help with that. That's
Okay, what do you think of, go ahead, comment, the 3 of you.
So Hassan, just to make sure that I'm clear on what you're talking about, is that you're suggesting you find 2.
the second half of next fiscal year.
So, second half of FY 2021.
So for this year, though, she's left with what she has.
No,
the
5. She has the 2 interns, Lloyd, and another
Well,
position.
interns, let's be clear, are not auditors, and they can't audit.
Yeah, but
So
it,
2, with 2.
it's Lloyd, a person she's hiring, 2 interns.
And
Is there a,
one part-time.
I have nobody. I have no staff.
who are the 5 after you hire the last person?
I have 2 interns and I have 2 auditors, one that I have not yet hired for that was an internal auditor. I have 4, including 2 interns who I need to make clear are not auditors.
We got that, okay, go ahead.
So then, what you're saying is in the next half, it would be 2.
2 more in addition to what
A
you said.
year from now.
And obviously that 2 would not include the data things. Would
Or,
not-
or support staff, which I'm
Yeah.
seeking
No,
more
I
support
understand.
staff.
Will not include those. And that will be a stretch for me because of the way we're designing the budget, we're freezing the hiring, trying to reduce the payroll. So I'm gonna do my farthest because I wanna make sure her office has the resources that she needs. But I can't go to the board and say, give us $600,000 without talking about raising rates. I mean, let's be honest about it. And I'm totally okay with filing the claim, even if the board decide, I can't disclose what happened in closed session, but if the board decide they made a mistake last time, they're gonna decide to go, I'm totally fine with that. But that route, the success of that route, giving the history, filing a claim, like Mary knows this, the state could say, sure, no problem, we'll give you $1, but then they find 20 reasons why it's not the case. So the dues is a good, solid way to do it. I'm gonna try my best with my team, with our CFO here, to figure out a way, how do we get the second half of next fiscal year 2 positions so Mary can move that way. If that's the result. I just want to make it very clear. I would never dispute what she's asking you to do and then her need for it. That's a given. I don't get into that. She knows it. I support her, etc. But when it comes to the budget, we have to talk about it.
There's a lot of things I need in life I can't afford.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stuart. Go ahead, Stuart. You were.
Well, so I'm not even sure who's the appropriate person to ask this question to, but would it be the charter of this committee to say, you know, we agree that this is the need, but the responsibility to figure out how it gets paid for is up to somebody else? Or is that part of our job too?
That's kind of our job, or at least it's my job, because I'm on the board. If I go to the
Right.
board and say, you guys figure it out, they're gonna say, what's your
But for the
recommendation?
purpose just, you know, of this committee, it's really to assess, is the proposed need?
Yes, you're quickly become a good politician, which is make the easy choice and pass the hard choice off to other people.
I know,
I'm
because I-
very impressed doing
No,
it.
no, 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 'cause I legitimately-
I'm asking you the hard choice.
I legitimately think that there's a big difference between saying, look, in reality, here is a need,
Yes.
right? There's a whole different reality of how do you pay for it. So if the vote really is, you know, a thumbs up, thumbs down, it's hard to use the we're not sure how to pay for it to give a thumbs down to something when there's a real demonstrable need, right? So that's really what I'm getting at. Maybe you guys see the question differently.
Who, did you want to
I
comment,
would just
Amberlynn?
offer, in response to that, Board
Okay.
Policy 39 does have a provision that states that it is the role of the audit committee to approve the annual audit plan and to make recommendations to the board regarding the budget needed to carry out the annual audit plan. So that is a role of the audit committee, to your point.
Right, they should, our recommendation would be to increase the budget.
Yeah, that's, I guess now, I've already stated, you know, that I kind of, from a management standpoint, would, if it were up to me, I would prefer let's sort of get a few people on board, make sure everything's working, and then we'll go from there. But that's, you know,
Yeah,
you've made a
so,
compelling
yeah.
argument as to why you
From
need
an
to go.
audit standpoint, you need staff to make sure.
No, I understand.
I mean, you have
Well,
to get through.
wait,
it.
those aren't mutually exclusive. If we agree we need 4 auditors, we're not necessarily agreeing we need 4 auditors tomorrow. Because what would be the answer? You just have to stagger the program to match the time.
Well, that's a little bit of my point. So I want to be clear. I'm not disputing the need. It's really, you know, I guess I have a little bit of a different perspective in terms of how you manage growth, let's call it.
I think.
But the financial reality, I guess, is not something I feel like this committee really needs to opine on.
I agree.
Can I?
I understand.
I
it
might as well just
influences
speak the truth because I'm running out of time.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying, Bill, go lobby the board to get the money, because the board is not giving the money absent a compelling argument from us. And that means me, if you don't want to stick your neck out and pitch a plan.
Maybe you can do it more eloquently than I
It just won't work that way.
Okay, so this is.
What you'd be doing is throwing into the wind. The odds of success of that are very low.
Yeah, but from.
And I'm trying to increase our odds of success.
So I'm in favor of increasing the odds of success, but I'm agreeing with Stuart for sure, and I think Bob maybe, as follows. If we try to hobble ourselves, because gee, we're not sure they can afford it, and then, God forbid, something comes up and it wasn't adequately done, all we've done is served as cover for you on the board, because, well, we did everything the audit committee asked. And the answer is, it's not my job to get the money, it's your job to get the money. My job is to recommend what the budget.
It is my job to get the money, and I'm
Yeah.
saying, how about helping me out here?
So can I make a recommendation to help you out?
Thank you.
I wouldn't have said it that way, but good.
So
Right.
I think the discussion is fair. I think Mary should go to the board and start the discussion without mentioning the division, but letting the board know that this is the source of funding for this, and have a discussion with the board. And if that discussion goes nowhere and you get to 0, my offer is still on the table.
We'll take it.
I will do my best, and I might go into an area of maybe going with a risk of some overhead. But I think Mary should be able to talk to the board on March, when is it? March 8th.
Are you, okay, come on.
And have discussion
Let's-
without mentioning, any specific things.
Okay, but come on, let's play this game out. She does that, and someone asks the viable question, where will the money come from?
Well,
And
that's part of my presentation, is
That's what she's gonna say.
there are options, here's your options. It's
Okay.
not saying, I want membership fees, it's, here's some options,
Right,
consider.
but here's what will happen.
And also-
They will ask Hassan, and Hassan will say exactly what he said here, which is
Yeah. Two options.
risky going for the state, and I think you ought to pay for it out of dues.
And I think it's more, if they, just to answer your question, I feel this is an important function that she's serving, and if they feel it's important enough, they might say yay. But I agree with you that, given that we just doubled the dues, it's very hard for most of them to go back to their cities and saying, I'm doubling it.
And I'm telling you guys, so we can cut to chase, I'm not even voting for it on the board,
Well,
okay?
And also, I think,
I'm a no, so.
I think she's done such a good job presenting the case as to why there's the need. I just feel like we can't responsibly say that, no, that need isn't there, right? I think to approve the recommendation and have it go to the board, even recognizing the financial realities, I don't think this committee is saying that for the board to not absolutely do everything she says is an obligation of their fiduciary responsibility. I just think the principal position is she's presented a compelling need. And so, yeah, we can't deny that there's a need. Whether you can execute 100% of it, I guess I just think is a different question.
So my point is, I kind of agree with Stuart is, she goes to the board, she presents the case, you're on the board now, and you say, if you think the discussion is going south, I'm gonna make a recommendation that we charge the executive director to work with Mary in staggering a couple of positions next fiscal year. You could, there's a way
Yes,
out.
yes.
So
Yeah, I can pull the ripcord, sure.
Give her
And so
Either that or
we
put
can
Mike
move
Pence
past
in
this, I am very comfortable with that. I think I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't do this and say, I'm not gonna have someone at the end of the day come back to me and say, you didn't do what we hired you to do, and me not be able to say, but I brought you the need, and I'm not gonna do that.
I don't think.
No, that part, nobody has disputed, no one has disputed your need to bring the need.
So I think it's important that me and the audit committee bring the need and let them decide
Just have a
if they want the
discussion.
need or they want to stagger the need. That's,
And in
I'm
that
not
dis-
even okay with that.
And in that discussion, I just want to make it clear so you don't misunderstand me. I'm going to say it very clearly to the board, there's two ways to fund this. State pays for it or you pay for it. And if they say no to those, you direct me to go find money for a couple of positions in the second line.
That's,
Because what-
that's exactly
what
how the
thing-
game's gonna play out.
That's,
Okay with that.
And I think that's fine. I still think we're fulfilling our responsibility in the best sense of it to actually recommend this. And then, the realities of the financial situation are not, solely our purview.
You ready for a motion?
But it is our purview.
You ready for a motion?
it's a preview for, in terms of recommendation.
Recommendation.
So you're, Stuart, you're not recommending any financial plan to pay for it? You're saying you're,
I
that,
don't think that's part of what we're being asked to do.
No.
that's what Amberlynn said we have the authority to do, though.
No, that's
No,
the,
they recommend.
I didn't hear it that way.
Okay, go ahead, Amberlynn.
say, that after approval of the audit plan, make recommendations to the board regarding the budget needed to carry out the annual audit.
Recommendation on the budget.
But
Okay, if you interpret budget
Budget
meaning
needed.
how much we need and not how you fund the budget.
That's our job, budget needed. We're ready for a motion?
My God, that is like slicing
This
hairs beyond belief, but go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna make the following motion. Go ahead and say it for me, please. This is like the Mike Pence deal, this is a crisis breaking out around the world. I'm putting Pence in charge. Take it.
do we have to craft a motion, or is it simply a
Yes.
motion
Well,
is,
I
the
would
motion
say
is
that
to
the-
approve the
So
recommendation?
the recommendation, just to be clear, because there has been quite a bit of discussion, the current recommendation in the report is to approve the revised audit plan that is attached to this report and recommend recommend the budget presented by Mary for approval by the board of directors.
That was exactly my motion.
So that is what is
Second.
the recommendation in the report.
Okay, so that's your motion.
That's my motion.
I'll be happy to second that.
And I just want to state really quick, I'll work with whatever I'm given to the best of my ability with the clear understanding that I have an obligation to follow professional auditing standards in the yellow book. That's my obligation under AB 805 and as a professional CPA. That won't change if I have 1 staff or 10 staff. But, so in that, I may get less auditing done, and there's a risk associated with that, and that needs to be understood.
Yeah.
So you're going, I'm just putting on the record, I'm going to vote no. So it's going to go 3-1, and they're going to say, why did you vote no? And I'm going to explain why I voted no.
You gotta vote with the majority?
Well, we haven't seen,
Well, I just want to kind of throw out a comment, is that what Mary is saying is that's what we as an audit committee have to understand, is that if she doesn't get a sufficient amount of staff, the audit plan is going to have to be revised, and there's going to be risk that she isn't going to be able to address. I like the idea, and hopefully I don't think that's changing with our recommendation here, is that she does present this to the executive committee. And puts it all out there, because I still feel that when the board last looked at this position, they didn't have all this other information as to what it was going to take to fulfill this obligation that AB 805 was putting on them. So that's my only comment. So
Good.
So, and the reason I'm voting no is I think we're forfeiting our duties by not forwarding to the board a recommendation of how to finance it. I think we're not doing the job we need to do.
make the big bucks.
well, Emerald, can you just for clarity again, could you just read that?
Sure, the motion that's,
That
The part-
passage about.
Certainly, and that's-
Read it in slow motion, right?
Sure, and that's,
For
the
some of us
board
who are
policy
slower.
39, which is the policy regarding the audit committee. It's section 3.1.7, and it says that one of the roles of the audit committee is to approve the annual audit plan after discussions with the independent performance auditor and make recommendations to the board regarding the budget needed to carry out the annual audit plan of the independent performance auditor.
The budget needed, I ever interpret that as not just
Yeah.
the expense side, it's the income side.
But I have identified in that packet the 3 potential sources of reimbursement.
There we go. We've done an awesome job. Let's vote.
And what he's trying to avoid is
I'm trying to
my
get you
dead
up here,
budget.
man.
Oh, I'm going to
He's
be able
having too
to
much time.
say I told you so like endlessly after this, guys. I just don't want any doubt of what's the way the game's playing, okay?
It's important to you?
It
Fine.
totally is, because,
All right. There we go. Are we all in?
Sorry, but
Way to go, Stu.
it says received.
Yeah, it's got it.
All right.
Are you
okay.
gonna call for the weighted vote where you overturn?
You want to stick around for the second part?
Oh, sure.
Okay, go ahead. Let's do 6, Mayor.
I'll make this really short. If there's any questions, I can answer them. We performed an organizational analysis as part of the risk assessment and getting an understanding to identify areas of either where there needed some stronger controls as a result of the movement or the organization of certain areas or the reporting lines of certain areas. That analysis was performed. I provided the report to Hassan and his staff, and Hassan provided a response which is included. The only thing that is going to be revised before this goes to the board, and I'm recommending that it be sent to the board for informational purposes only, that I initially in the January 2020 first organizational chart that was sent out had a solid line of the chief counsel to the board and a dotted to Hassan. But the updated one that Hassan provided in his response to me had a dotted line to the board and a solid line to Hassan, so it kind of got flipped. So in my first response, I stated that management had taken my recommendation for that, and I have to revise that in that he does have a dotted line to the board, but not a solid, which is what I recommended. So other than that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
It's a question for the staff. I thought we sent that to the board.
The-
Oh, no, the chair and vice
just
chair
the
got
chair.
it. Okay.
Okay, do you want to comment on anything there?
No, you saw my response. As I told you in my response, I respect Mary's recommendation. I implemented some of them because I believe they're right on, and we immediately implemented them. I didn't agree with others. And that's the way my report is written, and I'll be happy to answer any question.
Okay, any comments?
I just had one thought, and maybe the chair could comment on this. Sort of, one of the things I think is challenging, certainly when sitting on committees like this, but I gotta believe so much more so even for the board, is just the deluge of information and data in all of these presentations. And the one thing I would just suggest is to do what you can to try to bring up front the recommendations, because there's no question that some people are going to have like the 30 seconds to look at the package, as opposed to all of us who have nothing but time to go through the full depth of the reports. So that it's really more of a style thing. Before sending to the board, perhaps might consider trying to bring up front the recommendations.
The recommendations fall under each of the areas I addressed immediately after. So
No, I
you're
understand. It just,
recommending-
well, okay.
So are you kind of talking about
Just the style of the
summary?
presentation, not
It's,
the,
like
yeah,
a
kind of
summary
more of a,
page or something?
something
like
that's a
that?
little bit more summarized up.
So the summarized, the recommendation and how I summarize those, I included the recommended org chart that shows where everything lies.
Right, and I know this may sound crazy to you, but at least as I looked at it, it's kind of all the way in the back. And just call me, sort of simple, I just start reading stuff from the front, and I sometimes get interrupted and don't get to the back. That's all I'm saying. Well, that's just a
Okay.
thought.
All
But otherwise.
I think to that point, so sometimes my board complains that they have too much information and not organized, and sometimes they don't have any information, sometimes it requires the middle. I think you can't really summarize this in a way, because this deals with every area, and I responded to every area too. I would hope if a board member wanna get into this, that they read the whole memo and whole response, which
Yeah.
we're planning to send to them. There's nothing there is gonna change what I think, but, the board could come and says, no, we don't agree with you. I would tell them, sorry, you don't agree with me, you need to find somebody who would manage this agency the way you see it. To me, respect very much what Mary said. I agreed with some of it and I changed it. Don't agree with others, but I think we have to be conscious of the fact that you have to run an agency based on your experience. You're hired to run an agency based on what you think is done. Nothing is written in stone. A year from now, I myself, so I want to make changes. That's what my job is. I don't get the board involved in any personal decision whatsoever. I don't ask their permission. I want to add stuff here, reduce stuff there, because I shouldn't. They hired me to deal with that day-to-day thing. So it's tricky. I mean, I would hope this does not get into, well, you didn't tell me you're going to reduce the workforce, or you didn't tell me you're going to make these changes. And my answer would be, that's not for you to decide. There can't be 21 executive directors at Sandec. There have to be one, and 21 board members. So I approach organizational chart very seriously. And I've been in this business too long to know that I make decisions based on what I think is right. Now, if the independent office comes and says this is leading to inefficiency or waste, I will be the first one to listen and say, okay, show me how and let me change. But that's, so the board, they need to get this, they will get it, both Mary's memo and my response. But I would hope that they don't think it's having public discussion about stuff, because I will have none of that. I'll let them discuss it, or let them run the agency, but as long as I'm running the agency, that's the way it's gonna be.
Okay, so do I have a motion? I think we're going to be done in a second. Do you have a motion or a second? And a second on this?
Can I offer one comment first?
Sure.
Based on my personal experience, and I have run corporations in addition to having run a law firm, I agree with your unitary executive comment, and I think I personally think the solid line of John Kirk reporting to you, but having access to the board is the correct form.
And I agree with Mary's recommendation, not only John, but the CFO and the director.
Yeah, I think that the unitary executive is very important. If certain people have access to the board, but respond to you or answer to you, That, to me, seems like the efficient way. It also means if something goes wrong, we know who to blame.
Exactly. And and by the way, all my executive team, they know this, I tell them this every day. They don't have to go through me to communicate with the board. They can have direct communication with the board, because this is the way you have to trust the people work.
I agree with that. But with that comment, I'm prepared to make the recommendation.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, all those in favor? Continued public comments? None?
Item number 7, I can make it in 2 minutes.
Oh, number 7, forgive me, I'm sorry, I thought we were.
Well, at your last meeting, you discussed the potential revisions to board policy 39 to reflect some changes.
Thank you. I actually more enjoyable to be with this committee meeting than the board.
Can I come back up after this? Okay.
Au revoir.
And so the changes to board policy 39 to reflect some of the revisions that you'd like to see regarding the membership and the terms. Those are provided to you in red line as an attachment to the report. And just to review them very quickly, the direction that you gave was a proposed edit to specify that either the vice chair or the chair be a public member, which is reflected in red line. There was a suggestion from the audit committee that public members specifically serve a 4-year term instead of a 2-year term, which is reflected in red line as well. And then also that the term limits be eliminated for both the public and the board members, which is also reflected there. And so with that next steps, if those red lines meet with your approval, they would be submitted to the Sandag Executive Committee and then on to the board of directors for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Bob? What do you think about the elimination of all term limits?
The discussion that we had last time,
Yeah, I missed
we
it.
met, I'm in agreement with it.
Okay.
I see no reason to have limits. We may have individuals, public members that want to stay on. They have the time to stay on. So I don't have any problems.
Let me ask Mary, do you, as a performance auditor or an independent auditor, what are your thoughts about total elimination of term limits?
In my experience in the past, it's been very difficult to, I don't know why everyone doesn't love us, but they just don't. It's been very difficult to get volunteer public members to stay on for a long period of time on audit committees. I think it's appreciated and important, and I think if we put term limits on, we might limit that ability to have a fully staffed public representation, and I think that that's really important. And I also think that it takes a while to learn the organization and to be comfortable with the relationship both with the independent performance auditor and staff and executive director. And so I don't see a problem with it.
Okay, well, would you let me make a motion on this one? With the comment that the concern I have is only the term limits. I wasn't here for that discussion last time. If the big board were to say, let me be real clear, I think the 4-year term is a very good idea. I mean, so I'm much in favor of that. If they were to make the decision that after 2 full 4-year terms, you should step off for a year, that would probably make me happier. But other than that, I think the proposal, as with the red lines, is appropriate. So
I would agree with you on the term limits.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
want unlimited terms.
Well, can we modify it today?
If you make a motion, I'll second it.
Okay, so if you're willing to receive that motion, I would then say we adopt it as it is, but with the amendment that we leave to Amber Lynn to draft.
Or just delete the reference to term limits. You don't have to amend it, right?
Well-
Because isn't the term limits in addition to it?
No,
Well, so a few things. So the way that it's currently drafted, it contemplates specifically for the public members a 2-year term with a max of 5 years, so effectively 2 terms in a row. So if that were the direction of the audit committee, I would need to go back and do some further edits to clarify that, because for purposes of the public members, it would be 2 4-year terms, which would be 8 to 9 years.
Yes, you'd have to make all those conforming amendments.
Yeah.
You could be reappointed as a public member after a year off, And my motion would have no effect on the elected members, because they basically come in ex officio, and I don't want to try to get involved in La Mesa politics. But I think on the public members, the three of us, 2 4-year terms is enough to, then you take a year off and give the opportunity of a fresh look or new blood or something. But 8 years is a valuable service, and since we're now only in our first term anyway, unless we just get extended, none of us have served a 4-year term, so we would actually be able to go 10 years, just to kind of enrich ourselves with this. And I want to respond to you, Mary. You made the comment about volunteer positions. I've litigated this case at the Ninth Circuit, and they were saying, oh, we can't possibly find enough Spanish-speaking teachers. And the allegation, my response to that was, pay more. They're there, you just have to pay. You've got 3 people here who are volunteers. If you paid some money, you will get people. We're happy to do it, but there's no way to get there. So I think 2 full 4-year terms with 1 year off is what it goes. That's what I would, if you'd incorporate all those changes, that would be my motion.
So then the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay? And you just rewrite it. And then the
You
rest
don't have to
of it,
rewrite it right now.
but the rest of it was fine that you had.
So without
But the
modification.
All right, let's vote on that. All those in, everybody vote. If you agree with Paul's motion, you vote yes. If you disagree, you vote no.
Don't vote no, it still hurts my feelings.
There you go.
And I just, had you by any chance had an opportunity to talk to the vice chair about the chair, vice chair change that's being proposed?
No, I haven't had a chance to talk to him.
But you're okay with the way you obviously vote yes and yes?
Bill's gonna cry himself to sleep tonight, but the other.
Yeah, yes, I voted for that, yes, okay. I'm sorry, I was calculating something. No, I didn't get to talk to Bill. Did you talk to him?
Well, he spoke in favor of it at the prior meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, I voted for it, so they were good. All right, now, continued public comments. No? Okay, upcoming meetings. The next audit committee is the 27th of March. And are any of the 3 of you coming to the retreat?
Do I understand that's like March 13 or something?
11, 12, 13.
But is there?
And the 13 is the day that the presentation's
You don't
gonna
have
take
to
place.
stay the entire time.
Yes.
Come to the retreat.
And so,
Is that right?
That's the 12th. The
Oh,
Thursday,
wait.
the 12th is when you're speaking. Is that what you're?
Oh, I thought it said EC was the 13th.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant your presentation.
when is Mary's presentation?
Mary's presentation is on the 12th in the morning, but
But-
the EC is on Friday, the 13th.
So
Okay.
the presentation on
Yeah.
this is on Friday the 13th?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Would you do this?
Wait, hold on.
Send me an
The
email.
discussion of this audit committee.
It's Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Okay, and how is it going to be structured? Am I going to be on the panel and Stuart going to be on the panel with Mary?
Oh, you're gonna come.
You're gonna be there to introduce me? That's at the.
Right, we're both
So
confused.
we have 2 things.
Yeah.
This one will be on the 13th to the EC. That, I welcome everyone to come and support that. But there's also a presentation on the 12th, just in a general sense. We're gonna be sitting, and I would like it very much if the chair, you could at least, and members are welcome too, to come and be part of that discussion. And it's really just to share about the audit committee and the IPA and why we're here and what we do. And that's sort of like a 30-minute, is that it? 30-minute kind of
Well,
ask
since I'm going to be
questions.
giving the minority opinion on the one
But
I voted
that's
for
on-
one.
yeah,
That's
that's
at the
at the-
retreat.
that's at the
So I'm
retreat
assuming
on the
you should be there
13th.
to give the majority opinions to it.
Yeah.
And Paul, and anyone who else.
Okay, I was planning to be there on Thursday, wasn't on Friday, but let me check, and if it's.
Am I invited to
helpful-
the executive committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, would I be, I don't know, would
There's
I be
room for
invited
you to
if?
sit.
Could he come too?
Well, there's room for, it's a smaller room, but it's like this size room, and then the executive committee, of course, will sit at the dais, and she will join our CFO, and he's gonna be discussing the FY '21 budget, and then she's gonna join him, Andre, at the same table, so it's a great time, and that's an intimate discussion, so you have a chance.
I mean-
Or we could write the majority and the minority opinions in writing, you just read them.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer for people to show up and show the importance or the non-importance of the funding. And also, I think at the presentation, I welcome you guys to also be part of that discussion, because the board members may want to know about you guys as members and what it's about, not just me. And that's 30 minutes, but that's also on the 12th.
So Laura, just make sure I'm not confusing myself here. The executive committee meeting on the 13th, is that open to the public?
It is, yes.
Oh, so there's no Brown Act thing?
No.
Stuart, just to be clear, I'm not agreeing with your position, so I don't really want to, I have to sort of,
Right.
I don't want to be in a position where I'm speaking for you.
No, I just think that the position is actually quite simple, which is that we agree with the need, and we didn't think it really is our purview to try to solve the financing equation. Is that?
And
I agree with you.
and my position would be.
You can disagree,
You're,
but that's the position.
The openness of that implies that we would support a dues increase, and I don't support a dues increase.
I don't think it does that. I mean, it just says that we're not gonna get into how you're gonna pay for it.
Okay, well, I'm just telling you what I'm going to say.
No, that's fine. I think
But
I'm
Bill,
pretty clear.
just to be, do you support the positions, the need for the positions?
If money were no object, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
I don't, and this is why I disagreed with you along the way. I don't think you can parse it that way, because it's fanciful to say, oh, we want something, but you guys figure out how to fund it, because I'm basically going to be tasked with explaining how to fund it, and you can say, no, the board's going to be. Well, who's on the board from the audit committee? It's me. So I'm telling you, I'm telling you, you've put yourself in a difficult situation the way you've played your hand here. But let's play it out.
Well, I don't think of it as a game that is being played. I think of it as she's expressed, this is the need. As I interpret Amberlynn's reading of our purview is to assess and recommend the need. And I think we're doing that. I'm not trying to strategically anything.
I'm using the analogy of a game as a reference. It's obviously not a board game, but I've been in government a long time. I know how people vote. I'm pretty good at accurately predicting how these things happen, and I predict that model you have will end up with zero funding, and we'll be back in March redoing this. But I have to let you execute your plan the way you see it, so that when it'll play itself out, and then in March we'll start fixing it.
Okay.
Fair enough, okay?
Yeah.
If you're right, and the board will fund all those 4 positions right now at a dues increase, hallelujah. Okay?
Ready for a motion to adjourn?
We don't need a motion to adjourn. I think we're good. All right, there you go.